Right, I hope you can hear me now. Good evening. I'm with Cam Valley Forum. Altogether better, I coined a few months ago, thinking that every river organisation involved in Floating Pennywort, when we get together, we can do it so much better. On this first one, we've got before and after removal, and the bottom right is a ditch with quite a few tons in. That was done purely by volunteers. So even huge, hefty mats can be cleared, though we weren't mad enough to try to do it in August, which was this peak time. We waited till the next April when the mats had gone through their winter phase and were much weaker. So great ooze. One of my concerns, apart obviously from the health of the river itself, is where Pennywort might end up. And just down the river from the Pennywort is the ooze washes, 80 kilometre plus of ditches. Certainly don't want it to get in there. And we know that Pennywort does float down in great amounts during floods in the winter. Hopefully, once they reach the washes area, they'll just go out to sea on the Delf or the New Bedford River, which are the rivers on either side of the washes. But about a year ago or so, I did find Pennywort in the New Bedford River. And also it was trapped at the sluice at Erith, which was going into the New Bedford. So there is a chance it could get into the ooze washes, and that's even more of a reason for eradicating Pennywort throughout the Great Ooze. So we want to find it for two reasons. If it's a new outbreak, and it's a large outbreak, unexpected, a new area that hadn't been looked at before, we need to know about it. And also, if we've been removing it and we think we're close to eradication, we want to keep on monitoring, mustn't be complacent, and we have to look time and time again for small mats to arise from where we'd missed them in the first place. And we have so many waterways with high, tall vegetation on either side that walking and trying to peer over, it's fine for big mats, they can be seen so easily, but it's the small strands, small mats that are tucked into the water's edge that we want to find early on. And there's nothing better than the canoe. Though if you do have vantage points, even binoculars can be pretty good. And there are some stretches where you can walk for long distances and look carefully. And a drone, well, a drone could be very useful if you got open countryside and you got permission. And the other thing we're looking at is satellite imagery. Perhaps Copernicus might be able to pinpoint Pennywort. It's got a horrible evil green color. And even though I don't think it stands out amongst other plants too well, we might find that we can take a map and the Pennywort will glow out at us in a different spectral color. But that's for the near future. So we start with the big boys, and we have boats such as the conveyor Berkey, where once the cutters have cut a swath of the Pennywort, the conveyor belt grabs it and it just brings it up in huge amounts to be stored until it's taken out at some other point. And also we've got the smaller Swede boat, which can work very well. This is the Cook Stream near Godmanchester, and this guy must be very patient because he knows he's got an awful lot of Pennywort to get out. But bit by bit, these things work very efficiently. Having said that, they have to be lifted up and sort of shaken onto the bank. They can't get it any further away from the river than that. And as you can see, what can be left is a fringe of Pennywort, which perhaps was missed, or more likely it's been shaken back into the water. So if you're going to do this sort of work, it's a good idea to have a boom just downstream so that anything getting into a fast flowing river won't be swept away to be trapped further down. So talking of trapping, the cam above Cambridge, which we first started to work on, wintertime, we did get trapped pennywort within willows, which were either growing from the riverbed or were fallen or dangling in the water. And once you leave these, they just grow into these large, dense mats, which become uncontrollable. So what we tried to do in April was to rake out from punts. This was our first punting trip. And I think our morale was not too good because perhaps we didn't have the right tools. Perhaps we didn't go back again frequently enough. But we sort of, 2017, we just looked on and saw the pennywort come back. Canoe Club Cambridge joined us in the autumn, and partly because they wanted to find a way through the tangling pennywort so they could actually enjoy their leisure. But eventually, with Anne Miller, a colleague of mine, she organized some funding, and we had 90 man days of pruning back of the willows, a one-off situation, because we don't like doing this too much for the habitat. You can see the pennywort on the left, which is still there. You can see the effects of the pruning on the right. And at the same time, at the beginning of 2018, we had an almighty flood, which tended to push everything downstream as well. And we had a chicane boom, which trapped everything, well, most of it anyway, because we certainly didn't want that to end up in the lower cam. Having done that, all we had to do was go back time and time again in canoes, kayaks, or on the bank and look for little bits which we had missed and catch them before they started to grow into a bigger mat. The smaller the better, in my opinion, if you can see it. So for the upper cam, Cambridge to Grantchester, we had quite bad situation, and now we've eradicated it, though we're still looking. So going on to the lower cam, again, I consider canoes to be so important, and especially Canadian canoes, because you can put a builder's bucket in the center of it to fill up. So we had a working party in June. It was, pennywort was building up, but we had Tom Larnick of the Cam Conservators with his weed cutter. And I'm showing this slide because it just shows that it's important to have some communication and coordination with other organizations. Some of the mats at this time were too big for canoes. We'd have spent all day just sort of doing a small section. So he took out the bigger mats, leaving the remnants for the canoes to take out. Of course, some of these remnants were in bramble, in reeds, in fallen branches. So it's not an easy task. You have to spend quite a lot of time, even if it's a remnant. We have to inform the marina and moorings owners that they have a contribution, and this particular lot were enthusiastically taking it out. It took us from 2 o'clock until about 7:30 in the evening to do, well, you can't see it all, but there was a lot there. So this was back in February, I think. All we have to do now as a volunteer is take out the little bits and pieces which inevitably will persist there for a year or two. And also the Cam Sailing Club, they've promised to get involved this year. They couldn't last year because of COVID, and they'll be patrolling from Clayhythe to Wattisham Loch. All these people together will be helping. And of course, we've got Ben Jones at Jones Boatyard at St. Ives. He has been volunteering, and he's been towing volunteer canoe boats up to Houghton and the trout stream and around there, so the volunteers can work in the canoes. It's always good to get canoes in the right place quite easily, because you don't want people to be tired before they actually start the work. So just a few slides on what the pennywort looks like in the winter. We're at the stage, well, we were this winter at the stage of trying to pick out small bits of pennywort Because if you leave it, it becomes more obvious. But if there's too many obvious pieces there, they become alarmingly large too quickly, and then you lose control of it. So it is better to get it earlier on. And you can see within these two black lines, these tiny little pieces, which have gone a bit pale green, a bit yellow, not brown, but sort of yellowy green. But they're dangling down maybe about 30 centimeters, and the underwater part of it is perfectly healthy. And you can get it on the riverbed. You can get it maybe 20 centimeters, 50 centimeters, even a meter deep. And eventually they'll come up and produce a mat. So difficult to see these unless you actually stand on the bank and look intently. And you also, if you get some waves on a windy day, you can't see them. So these things can be missed. And this is from a video of mine. More so in a ditch, the stolons can actually bury themselves into the soft bank. This was the stream. The stream was above this level in the winter, but by sort of May, June, the stream had lowered, and yet I was taking out clumps of stolon. Another reason why you think you might have cleared it, the floating stuff on the water, but there's a reservoir in the bank side. Again, you don't normally see this in rivers, but you do get it in ditches. And in the summer, well, until the reed warblers go, you can't work in the reeds. And even then, you can't get in with rakes, and the boats can't get in. But if you wait till winter time, it becomes a lot easier, and you can smash down the dead stuff with a rake. And if it's not too wet, your volunteer can move out towards the water's edge. So you can work through out to reed bed without it having to be sort of cut down by a professional. And another reason for missing it is in the winter, it's so easy to see everything because your tall marginals haven't grown up. You get pennywort that grows behind revetments, it gets behind clumps of tall plants, and it can stay there, gets obscured by the surrounding vegetation. And you might be taking it out from a boat, but in fact, you have to dig it out, literally dig it out of the mud. Again, winter time is a good time to do that. So bank raking is useful. The photograph that Paige showed, I think it might have been a ditch with a large mat, and they glyphosated it. With hindsight, I think that's the sort of job, if you can get down the bank, which I think you could have done there, that could have been raked out in a couple of hours. You have to do it in a way that so you don't break your back, but there is a technique, and if you work in pairs and have a rest, you can take out tons of this stuff in a half day. So it works fine when you can get to the bank and actually see it at the water's edge. But of course, on the Great Ouse, there's a great many stretches where bank raking is perfectly impossible. And this comes back to how necessary canoeists are. Well, canoeists, all boaters. Again, the water's edge is obscured by May, so bank rakers can't work. But in the winter time, it's a superb time, especially when you have a good revetment with no breakage in it. And this is the sort of thing we have on the lower cam, which is a joy to walk along and to pick out the pennywort. And if you're working with other organizations, you want to record where you've been. I tend to do this as a matter of course. So after a few months, I can remember where I've been. And it can be done quite easily on something like Google My Maps. And to finalize this altogether better, a great many people who want to work and get rid of the pennywort need to talk to each other and coordinate with each other. There is a sequence in my mind. As I said earlier, the big boys take out the big stuff. The small stuff after that can be mopped up by the small volunteer, perhaps canoeists. And I think most importantly of all, we need to have good communications and feedback about what we're all doing, so that we don't miss out sections, and we coordinate the timing so that everybody can do things most efficiently. That's my talk. Thank you.